This is going to be a change from my regular content towards one of my nerdiest and greatest passions, which is The Lord of the Rings and other works by J.R.R. Tolkien. This episode will be on the lore behind Shelob, the great spider, daughter of Ungoliant, whom you probably have seen messing around with Frodo and Sam in the three Tolkien films by Peter Jackson, or more recently being reinterpreted in the video game Middle-earth: Shadow of War. So why am I doing a piece on the lore of Shelob? Because, like most of you watching, I picked up Shadow of War recently and was shocked to see how they took Shelob's character and allowed her to transform from a great spider to this sexy human woman. I am not here to cry and whine like some butthurt fanboy. I actually find it rather awesome and unique, this spin on the Tolkien universe, allowing Shelob to do so. However, by the end of this episode, I will give a point of view purely from the written works by Tolkien, which disproves this being a possibility. So let's start off with the lore behind Shelob. She is for her, obviously in English, and lub is an archaic English word for spider, thus forming her name, Shelob. Now this is an excerpt from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, where we're first introduced to Shelob. There, age-long she had dwelt, an evil thing in spider form, even such as once of old had lived in the lands of elves in the west, that is now under the sea, such as Beren fought in the mountains of Terror and Doriath, and so came to Luthien upon the green sward amid the hemlocks in the moonlight long ago. How Shelob came there, flying from ruin, no tales tell, for out of the dark years few tales have come, but still she was there, who was there before Sauron, and before the first stone of Barad-dûr, and she served none but herself, drinking the blood of elves and men, bloated and grown fat with endless brooding on her feasts, weaving webs of shadow, for all living things were her food, and her vomit darkness. Far and wide her lesser broods, bastards of the miserable mates, her own offspring, that she slew, spread from glen to glen, from the Apfeldalth to the eastern hills to Dol Guldur and the fastness of Mirkwood, but none could rival her, Shelob the Great, last child of Ungoliant, to trouble this unhappy world. So to break this down for you, she is the greatest offspring of Ungoliant, the primordial spider. I won't delve into the story of Ungoliant. All you need to know is Ungoliant was an ally of Morgoth, Sauron's lord and commander. She was so powerful that Morgoth almost was defeated by her, but ultimately she literally ate herself to death. Perhaps if this episode does well, I will further do more content on Ungoliant and other characters of the Silmarillion. So Shelob is presumed to be born in arid Gorgoroth, the Mountains of Terror, a northern mountain range in Beleriand. This was a temporary home for Ungoliant and her children, one of which was Shelob, during the First Age, also known as the Elder Days. The First Age was around 3,000 Vailian years, which is 10 solar years, and the First Age ended with the War of Wrath, which was fought between elves, men, dwarf, the Valar, against Morgoth and his evil army. Morgoth was defeated and banished, and all of his servants fled, such as Sauron. As this was occurring, the continent of Beleriand sank into the ocean as a result of the war. Now, because of the War of Wrath, by the coming of the Second Age, or also known as the time period of Arda, Ungoliant was eating everything in sight, including her own children, who began to flee in terror. Shelob was included. Shelob fled Beleriand and made her way to Apfeldalth, the Mountains of Shadow, which is near Cirith Ungol, in the passes above Minas Morgul. She did this long before Sauron took the lands of Mordor for himself, and before the first stone of Barad-dûr was even placed. So for hundreds of years, Shelob resided in the mountainous region, forming labyrinths of webs within the network of caves she so could trap her prey. She feasted on everything available, but would sometimes leave her caves if a particularly juicy morsel was available. When Sauron made his home, he was aware of Shelob's presence in the mountains. He allowed her to dwell there because she made an excellent and incidental guard for the passage of Cirith Ungol. Sauron was even known to be fond of her, and yes, this is where Shadow of War game takes most of its inspirations. This fondness was in the form of treating her like a pet cat. In a somewhat rare show of humor, Sauron would refer to her as a cat and sometimes give her food in the form of prisoners that he had no more use for, or servants that simply displeased him. Reports of massacres made by Shelob would be carried back to Barad-dûr to further please Sauron's humor. Shelob would eat orcs who manned the tower at Cirith Ungol fairly regularly. However, she was a more effective guard for the pass than they, so Sauron never made any serious attempts to stop her, though it is said that orcs would often barricade her lair with stones out of fear, as I would too. I mean, that's terrifying, it's a giant spider attacking you. Now, if you read The Two Towers or watched the movie Return of the King, you know Gollum once was caught by Shelob when he was fleeing from Mordor. To save his own life, he vowed to Shelob if she let him go, he'd bring her juicier things to eat, which would eventually become Sam and Frodo later on. Shelob would then poison Frodo, but before she was able to feast on him, Sam bravely fought her off and stabbed her using Sting. It is unknown if Shelob recovered from this fight or succumbed to her wounds. The book states that the people of Middle-earth do not know her face. Sam, when entering further into Mordor to save Frodo, who had just been captured, puts on the One Ring, and through its power he can hear very far away, upon which he hears Shelob's bubbling noises, which is her in misery retreating into her caves, presumably dying. Although Shelob may have died, her offspring had fled her a long time ago because she was eating them, which was similar to her relationship to her mother Ungoliant. These spiders remained in Mirkwood. When men finally took dominion all over the world of Arda, that's the world of Middle-earth, the great spiders gradually disappeared. Shelob would have been the last of her kind. Now, as for her interpretation in the game Shadow of War, I'm not going to spoil the story of the game, other than the very beginning cinematic you probably have seen in the trailers for the game, and this is the encounter of Shelob at the beginning. You're introduced to her right away. But before I do so, I'm just going to give you a passage from The Two Towers which describes exactly what Shelob looks like. Most like a spider she was, but huger than the great hunting beasts, and more terrible than they because of the evil purpose in her remorseless eyes, those same eyes that he had thought daunted and defeated. They were lit with a fell light again, clustering in her outthrust head. Great horns she had, and behind her short stalk-like neck was a huge swollen body, a vast bloated bag swaying and sagging between her legs. Its great bulk was black, blotched with livid marks, but the belly underneath was pale, luminous, and gave forth a stench. Her legs were bent, with great knobbed joints high and above her back, and hairs that stuck out like steel spines, and at each leg's end there was a claw. So back to Shadow of War. She is shown to us in a spider form, though quite different from the description given before. As you can see, she's quite sharp looking, not bloated at all, more compact with zero hair. Then all of a sudden, she's revealed to be this incredibly sexy woman who talks to your character. I would describe her to be spider-like, but not to spoil the game, I won't talk more of her appearance further on in the game, other than the fact that developers chose to really run on the Sauron's pet-cat relationship. It turned into a very interesting backstory for Shelob's time in Mordor. I do have problems with the game's interpretation merely from a Tolkien literature standpoint, though I do love how the developers tried to make this story tie in with the Tolkien universe. They honestly did quite a good job, and it shows that they really read quite a lot of information into the character. Okay, so first, Ungoliant was a primordial being, and her origin is unknown. Not even the Valar knew. The Silmarillion states that she came from the darkness itself, which lies on the outside of Arda. She was an ally to Melkor, that's another word for Morgoth, and eventually betrayed him, and honestly made him look like a complete pussy. He cried out for help of his Balrogs to protect him while she was basically just kicking his ass. It's a hilarious scene from the Silmarillion. So I argue, Ungoliant is not an Arnor. These are the holy ones in the Silmarillion, such as Manwë and Melkor. Basically, you can think of them in Christianity as archangels. For in the Silmarillion, it is not said outright. However, there's long been an argument by fans that Ungoliant could possibly be a Maiar, and this is a lesser Arnor. You can think of them as regular angels. So this is a passage from the Silmarillion. The Eldar knew not whence she came, but some have said that in ages long before she descended from darkness that lies outside Arda. When Melkor looked down in Evi upon the kingdom of Manwë, and that in the beginning she was one of those that he corrupted to his service. So many Maiar were corrupted by Morgoth. A lot of people argue this passage I had mentioned previously reveals that Ungoliant was one of these such Maiar. Many Maiar, corrupted by Melkor, came to Middle-earth and assumed shapes and forms, such as the Balrogs. So back to Shelob. Very loose arguments are made that Ungoliant is possibly a Maiar. However, I would not credit this based on Tolkien's literature, because it is said that she seems to come from darkness only. Ungoliant also mated with spider-like creatures, meaning these were not Arnor, no, they were Maiar. So Shelob cannot be a Maiar if she's the offspring of a normal spider-like creature and a primordial spider like Ungoliant who cannot be confirmed to even be a Maiar. Now, about shapeshifting in Tolkien's literature. Shapeshifting can be performed by Arnor, Maiar, such as Sauron, who is very talented at doing so, Bjorn from The Hobbit, also known as a skin changer, and lastly by the Istari, such as Gandalf and the other wizards. Shelob was born from Ungoliant, so her form is a spider. She's not a skin changer, for example. Based on Tolkien literature, I think it's safe to say Shelob could not shapeshift into the sexy woman that we see in Shadow of War. Regardless, I found it was a fun way to reinterpret the character, and I strongly suggest picking up this game. Even the lore in the game is just amazing by itself. It really reveals a great love for the source material, and it's quite a great game.